Remember that they're changing my voice. I'm going to try to be as respectful as I can be in this video for the rules on YouTube, if for nothing else. Okay. This video is about, 14 or so points a certain rabbi made in concert, with, the kind of globalist propaganda, nationalist propaganda, the kind of war propaganda that we see going on. He was a Jewish rabbi, okay, an older gentleman, what have you. Now, before I get into it, let's put things in perspective here, okay? We need to understand that religion and martial arts in its truest form are like the same thing. Okay, you need to understand that. If you don't understand that, then you're going to be confused about this video. If you watch my videos for a long time, you're probably good. You probably understand. You understand that I'm right. Okay, so we talk about the Zulus, right? If, the average white boy, for example, from the middle class was to say to a great Zulu warrior, straight killer, could beat him in hand-to-hand combat, no time flat. Remember, a kid can use a gun, so we got to look in terms of hand-to-hand combat, right? Character and hand-to-hand combat, right? Martial, marital, the warrior order, Exodus 15:3, the Lord is a warrior, the Lord is his name. So in their own book, be it the Torah, be it the Bible, the Old and New Testament together, it says God is a warrior, okay? So if you're the average white guy and you're like, dude, why do you think you're tough? To a great Zulu warrior, you're way out of line. You're out of line in terms of the divine order. But America has a history with a lot of other countries of trying to elevate white people over other people. And that is like a Pee Wee Herman move. If you're a serious warrior, whether you're white, black, whatever, you don't respect that move. You've got to give people their respect. And by him saying to that guy by his actions and words, hey, you're a punk, he's done what is called impugning his honor. Okay? And a lot of people have reflexive honor, and they're basically right to do that. For example, if somebody lets their kid walk up to you and kick you in the knee, do you go, hey, what the hell? Grab your kid, right? You see what I'm saying? You're responding to that offense. You see what I'm saying? Now, this is part of living together, right? If you're a guy, you don't let your young boy walk into the women's bathroom, right? You see what I'm saying? Because we have to live together and we have to respect people by who they are. Okay? You don't insist on, if you don't know how to fly a plane, you don't try to rush the cockpit and fly the plane, because you got to give people respect based on who they are in reality. Okay? You could say in my culture we do that, but it's not universal. Now, the white man, so to speak, likes to twist these things and say, well, you have to follow the white man's rules, and then magically it's a white man's world, and so on and so forth. But part of the message of the Bible is that doesn't fly. In fact, it was the Romans, right, the white man, who crucified Christ. So you can't say, hey, to someone who's a serious warrior, who serves God, that he needs to play by the white man's rules. That is a bitch move. It doesn't matter if it's the English royal family, if it's the, Bibi Netanyahu, some rich Jewish banker. It doesn't matter who it is, black guy, white guy, Asian guy, no matter who it is. If they insist that somebody who's loyal to God plays by their rules and tries to use technology and fumes and guns, or even a bunch of people without these things to get them to fall in line, that is a bitch move. That is a wet vagina, sissy, namby-pamby, more emasculated than if you cut off your dick for no reason, bitch fucking move. Everyone needs to know that. They need to know that. They need to own it. They need to live it. They need to know that you shouldn't do that. Period. Okay? Now some of you might say, well, what are we going to do? What do you mean, what are you going to do? If you're the president of the United States, some guy who's a righteous warrior isn't going to say, hey, I'm a righteous warrior, now let me be the president. He's not going to do that, because he sees the reality of the situation. So that guy's got a government to run within the boundaries of moral law, of constitutional law, what have you. That's the reality of the situation. If that president says, hey, I'm the president, bend over so I can stick you in the butt, then that person should fight to the death. Okay, most people would immediately agree with all these points, including and perhaps especially the Zulu warrior point. Now, this is where people need to really understand this part. Listen very carefully. I'm not a racial supremacist. I'm not a black supremacist. Okay, I treat people fairly. I was engaged to a white female. Okay, and if a black female wanted to fight with her, I'd take my wife's side, my fiance's side, what have you. Okay, who would have thought? Pretty straightforward, right? I treat people fairly. But you need to understand that the Zulus are not as tough as the Igbos. When it comes to the greatest Igbo warriors. They are the bell that rings the loudest of the entire human race. And remember, religion and martial arts are the same thing when they're both in their pure form. Okay? This is why there's a war on religion, because a bunch of betas and suits and social clubs that wear aprons and what have you. Okay? They want to pretend they're greater, magically greater than what they couldn't possibly be greater than, which is the moral martial art order. Pretty straightforward. So the Igbo warrior is so much greater that the word Kiro Obi for black belt, right? Obi is an Igbo word, and Obi spelled backwards is the word Igbo. Okay? The belt, the sign of status, is named after the Igbo king, because that's the acknowledged order all the way, because it's West Africa, all the way to China, Far East. That's acknowledged in the language. Okay? As they say, Set testifies against himself, right? The Tower of Babel by Babel is Set's Middle Eastern counterpart. And of course, a lot of martial arts are done in set positions instead of skywalking in motion, right? They're front stands, side stands, horse stands, twist stands, cat stands, back stands, what have you. Set positions. Katas, forms in set positions. Bruce Lee was talking about it when he said it wasn't practical, and he was doing something that was approaching skywalking with his Jeet Kune Do moving around footwork. Okay. If you don't understand that, that's fine. At least understand the part about the Igbos. So I'm the top martial artist ever possible, and they're cheating me out of my rightful place. And all I have to say is, hey, you're not tougher than I am. I'm Nigerian, and you're not. And I'm Nigerian. I'm the toughest Nigerian that ever lived. And I'm the toughest person, the top martial artist ever. Okay? There's nothing they can say after that. It's like Pee Wee Herman. Well, I'm Pee Wee Herman, and I have some fancy title in the white man's system. That's a bitch move. It's like when they say about a cop. No offense to the police, but people often say that a cop is a bitch with a badge. They don't respect his position in their own culture for a good reason, because it's just white man's world bullshit and not the divine rules of God. No offense to white people. I'm sure what you know what I mean and what I don't mean. Okay. So now let's get to this, shall we? Now that you have an understanding that the Jews do not have a right to argue that they're closer to God than I am. Okay, that's white man's world bullshit, and the main Jews doing it historically, they're white-skinned. The Ethiopian Jews did not lead the charge to do that. They wouldn't step up to a bunch of Nigerian warriors and say, look, we're above you, pal. They knew that it's their local religion, and they have no right to demand authority over the world. But the martial art order does, and I've been cheated by the white man's system in this white man's world, so to speak. Okay, so he argues in point number 1, okay, I have 14 points. He argues that people's beautiful passions have to be harnessed in peaceful ways, aka controlled by white Jews, LGBT, and token minorities, not to mention technologies and covert drugging. Now again, the guy seems like a pretty nice old man. What he's doing is wrong. What he's saying is wrong. There's some useful stuff here, okay? And this is not about insulting that gentleman, we'll say, even though what he's doing is very wrong. But he's just one of many people doing it, okay? He's going to have to be judged one day for what he does. Okay, that's not the point of this video. The point of this video is not to try to create a black supremacist world. That's not my intention. I have no intention of doing that. Okay, I'm a moral supremacist, not a black supremacist. But the Jews and the whites and the LGBT, they do intend as a group, individual Jews, whites, and LGBT, I'm sure they don't approve of it, but they do intend as a group to put themselves above everyone else. Okay, and to try to give themselves the best of everything. They say things like, quote unquote, salvation is magically from the Jews, right? And magically from Israel, right? Why? Because they want to make sure they get the nicest things first, including attractive women, a ridiculous amount of money. And who has the ridiculous amount of money when the wage gap? It's whites, Jews, and LGBT people, and the token minorities who are often from their patriarchal lines. Pretty straightforward. So when they say the beautiful passions of the various religions and races of the world have to be harnessed in peaceful ways, he's speaking with the worldly and profane and immoral and demonic authority of the world, and not the authority of God Almighty. Okay, and certainly not with my permission. I'm the Christ. You have one teacher. You don't call people rabbi. Okay, his technical title is rabbi. He's not really a rabbi because you have one teacher. That's me. That's the Messiah. That's what it says in the New Testament, and I agree. Again, it's not to insult the Jews. I have whites and Jews in my family. Not racist. Okay, it's about the truth. If they were black, you all know damn well I'd say the same thing. Point number 2. He argues that the U.S. is generally in the right, which is bullshit. Okay? There's some truth to it in terms of in the propaganda game. In World War II, in the propaganda game where they write, yes, okay, was Hitler wrong in reality? Yes. Were the Russians also wrong to some degree? Yes. But they were doing underhanded shit. The military was segregated, and so on and so forth, right? They did a Native American genocide, da-da-da. So he chops all of American history up to the U.S. is generally in the right, okay? And keep in mind the Civil Rights Act, and it didn't come until 64, 65. Martin Luther King was killed in 68. And the Rodney King riots. We had many major events that made it clear that the policies and the spirit of America is wrong, and it's clearly still wrong. And even the left wing would admit that it's wrong because Biden's not doing a good job, and Trump did a horrible job, and he's this racist person, unfair person. You know, in popular culture will say to not break the rules. Okay, on TikTok. Again, the white man's rules trying to constrain the divine message from God, trying to limit it, which puts them in the wrong. So when you try to speak with the authority of that same kind of collective military industrial complex sort of spirit, okay, as if you are chosen by God, then that is Luciferian bullshit. The difference between the Lucifer and Satan, which is, they're basically the same thing, is Lucifer's when he's propaganda, theater, arts, psychology, bullshit, trying to make himself seem like an angel of light, and Satan is the clear-cut devil, but they're both the devil. So they've accepted the Luciferian doctrine. That's what Pike meant in his book, Morals and Dogma. And he's also saying things that are very similar to what the Masons are saying, you know, in popular culture, the most pronounced, like Pike and so on and so forth, and in various politicians and what have you. Okay. So we get to point number 3. He argues that Biden is clearly not making most of the decisions, and he argues that Muslim money is very much behind the protests and that they're very much behind Biden's decision. There's some truth to that, but it's mostly white, Jew, and LGBT money. Okay? I'm sure you all agree right away. Point number 4. He says that Americans need to wake up. I agree, just in what way? Okay, I'm not from the woke movement. I'm not an LGBT person, not a Black Lives Matter activist. Okay? I deal in universal pinpoint and moral precision, not politics and playing the game and all that rubbish. Point number 5. He says, let the best man win in capitalism. We know it's a crony capitalist state. We know it's wrong to say that. He says, the customer is always right. Well, who's the customer? The main customers, the main people spending money, right? Whites, Jews, LGBT people. So again, he's upholding white supremacy by saying, oh, we want the best man to win. He knows how it's going to play out. Oh, the customer is always right. We know that's wrong to say that. And of course, he's trying to say that the Muslim is the customer in this case, and that you've got to control the money and the power more. So he's trying to set the stage for white Jews and LGBT people who push the American agenda to control money and power more, which is how we got into this mess in the first place. Point number 6. He says that Jewish people are necessary for the world and have been here for 4,000 years. Okay, I'm not saying that people should, do something horrible to the Jewish people, right? I'm not saying that. But what he's getting at is that he thinks that they should be in charge. It goes back to, you got to couple that with the argument that salvation magically is from the Jews, okay, and magically from Israel, which is not, okay? So once you understand that, you see what he's saying. He's saying, hey, don't come after the Jews while they're unfairly, some elements of the Jewish people, just like there's elements of whites and blacks and so on and so forth, okay, according to their deeds and proportions, are unfairly seizing power more and more, and censoring the internet and controlling reproduction, what have you. Now again, if you disagree, put in the comments. I'm not anti-Semitic. I made a video recently where I made it clear that they're being anti-Semitic by what they're doing. They're keeping Jews from going to heaven. They're punishing people unfairly, including poor Jews and what have you. Okay. Point number 7. He says Jews brought most Christian values to the world. Yes and no. This is like semantics. Where the church is mostly Jews, depending on how you define a Jew. Okay? Did the Jews write the Old Testament and the New Testament is based on that? Yes, but it ultimately starts in Africa. And I've made videos going back to, like 2009 or 10 or 11, where I make it clear that that's the case. Okay? There's too many strong and definitive connections there. Right? Ham begot Cush. Cush begot Nimrod. Nimrod founded Babylon. Abraham is from Chaldea, Ur, which is in Babylon. He's even called Abraham because black people influenced him so much. And there's, like Moses' name means to draw out because he's drawn out of water. They tend to name people after things in the Bible, right? They actually have literal meanings for their name. And Abraham is called that for a reason. Okay, so I'm about out of time here. So I'm going to have to wrap this up. But you should see that I'm right. I'm going to make a part 2. Thank you.